your weekly horoscope with Jerry and Matt.
You can tell by the way I use my walk, I'm a woman's man. No time to talk. And she's buying a stairway.
Good evening, horror fans. Welcome to another edition of the Weekly Horoscope. I'm your host, Jerry, here with my partner, Matt. And Matt, this week is a topic that I've been looking forward to since the day we started this almost 2 years ago. Our topic is in our Best of the Decade series, and we're talking about the 1970s. And the reason this has been something I've been looking forward to so strongly is because, in my opinion, is without a doubt the best decade for horror ever. What's your thoughts on this topic, and what do you think about my statement?
I agree 100%. When I think of modern horror, I kind of think of it being birthed in the 1970s. And I see a lot of those trends that were done in the 70s trying to be recreated nowadays. And I think what they were trying to do with film in the 70s with horror, I don't think if it'll ever be replicated again. I think they can try. But I think with the technology they had and trying to do things that had never been done before had such a social impact, a cultural impact, that I don't think it can ever be replicated. I do think it's the birth of modern horror, in my opinion.
It has so many movies that are the defining movie of their subcategory and the real tent poles of the industry. You have The Exorcist, the definitive possession movie, one of the greatest movies of all time, of any kind. Halloween, the most influential slasher and a franchise starter. Alien, which is the standard for all sci-fi horror from then forward. Dawn of the Dead, generally considered the best zombie movie of all time. You have Carrie, which brought Stephen King into pop culture and as a source for film inspiration that continues now nearly 50 years later. You have The Omen, The Tale of the Antichrist. You have Last House on the Left, a hardcore introduction to Wes Craven into the world of horror. And Suspiria, which is probably peak Dario Argento for his entire career. And that doesn't include, Wicker Man, British folk horror, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the emergence of David Cronenberg, Phantasm, Hills Have Eyes, and of course our two films that we're going to feature tonight, which, and I don't say this lightly, both of these films I believe to be perfect.
I agree. And upon rewatching them, you actually, when you're looking for nuances, when you're watching a movie like this, you start to see you start to appreciate it even more. And I think I appreciate these movies even more now after watching them this past week than I did even before.
Yeah, our first film of the night is, as we've discussed in the past, you can hear hints of it in our opening song, our introduction to our show. It's Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's my favorite horror movie of all time. 1974, directed by Tobe Hooper, and everything about this movie is iconic. And I watched it again, paying attention to more detail than I ever have before. And instead of like picking it apart, like peeking behind the curtain, I actually came away more impressed than I already was.
Yeah, same. I watched it and thought that like the cleverness they put into the angles and the music and the sound effects to try to just create this atmosphere of madness was captured so perfectly. I don't like they've tried to do it in the series and it's just never been able to be duplicated.
Absolutely. Yeah. Everything from this on is a disappointment because of how high the standard is here.
And I read something interesting when I was doing a little research on the movie. I came across an essay, and this guy was talking about how he believes Texas Chainsaw Massacre is actually a subtle cosmic horror, like a Lovecraftian unknown horror, because we don't really know anything about this family or what like how they got there, what's going on. And he said also that they, in the beginning of the movie, they're talking about astrology and how astrology has to do with a lot of this. Like it's like, like Saturn's in retrograde or something like that, and
Yeah.
it means you're gonna have a bad day. And like there's in the beginning, there's this news report going on where just tons of bad stuff is happening throughout the world, everywhere. So like it almost has this Lovecraftian feel to it.
Yeah, I rather than walk through the movie scene by, I kind of looked at like the iconic parts of it, and it starts with the opening scroll. The opening scroll and the deep voice deadpan narration, and then it cuts to the iconic camera pulsing noise interlaced with decomposing body parts that flash with the camera flash and then fade. So you're only glimpsing the horror you're about to see. And then you hear this menacing news report of grave robbers, and you see this vision of this demented art made out of the bodies, and you go right into the unnerving credit images and sound. And you touched on it. One thing that jumped out to me upon this rewatch, as I was paying super close attention, is every scene there is an undercurrent of a dreadful noise, and it just from the opening scroll, this movie just pushes dread to the limits.
Yeah, it does with everything it's trying to do. It's interesting because in an interview, Toby Hooper said he was trying to get a PG rating for this movie.
I
He
saw that.
wanted this to get, yeah, he wanted to get a PG rating. He was like, how can I edit this movie to get it to be as horrifying as I can make it, but accessible to everyone with the PG rating? I mean, obviously it didn't happen, but that's how clever he was trying to be with the camera angles and like the lack of blood that people often think this is like a really bloody movie. It's not.
Yeah, I actually, it's funny, and let's acknowledge we are 50 years from the release. This movie is 50 years old. It's half a century old.
It's great.
And I was reading an article just last week was talking about influential horror movies, and the person who wrote the article, calls this movie an incredibly tense, blood-soaked gore fest. And I responded to the author, and I'm like, it's not. It
Right,
has this
right.
reputation because of the perfectly titled name of the movie. It sounds
Yeah.
like the most awful thing you ever heard, and all these things that are done throughout the movie to promote this menace and this dread and this terror. But there's very little blood in the movie.
Yeah, I think there's like three little blood scenes in the whole movie, but there's bones and death and decay, and everyone's kind of demented looking, and there's just a lot of madness. There's a lot of screaming, and the chainsaw is revving, so it's keeping your nerves on edge the whole time.
Yeah,
Like even when the hitchhiker's in the van, it's like there's just tension, right?
yeah.
Like every scene has tension in it.
That scene, you think this has nothing to do with the main storyline for a while, but you're right. It's so skewed, it's so odd, it's so weird that it does exactly that. It just keeps you in this, oh my God, what am I watching mode? And that's a good place to
Yeah.
start because that's one of the most influential scenes. We meet our crew, and it's Sally Hardesty and her wheelbound chair, annoying brother Franklin, and Jerry, Kirk, and Pam, and they're all traveling in a van, and they pick up this hitchhiker because of the heat, and he's odd.
And
He's
I'd like to say also, oh, I was going to say, having Franklin in a wheelchair is another great way to keep people on edge because it's like, well, this guy's helpless from the beginning, right? So it's just every scene with him in it, you're like, is something going to happen to him? He's in a wheelchair, right?
Yeah, there's a scene where he's on the side of the road and he's trying to pee in a can, and a big truck goes by, creates a big breeze, and he falls. His wheelchair rolls down the hill and he comes tumbling out, and it's like just another thing to add to this is going to be a disaster.
The tension.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The crazy hitchhiker used to be, he's got this weird birthmark on his face. He's got this strange mannerisms and these tics. And he says he used to be the hammerman at the slaughterhouse. And he starts talking to him about why the old way was better. And, again, Toby Hooper said this is a movie about meat. The premise of this movie is meat, and
Yeah.
this actually caused Guillermo del Toro, when he first saw this movie, he went vegetarian for like 6 months, which I thought was amazing impact.
Right. What a compliment.
Yeah, yeah, right. So this our odd hitchhiker, he takes Franklin's pocket knife and he cuts himself for no reason. He just cuts his hand, and this is one of the few scenes of blood. You see his own blood from his own hand, and he's just unstable. He takes a Polaroid of Franklin and he wants him to buy it for $2. He's like, it's a good picture, man. He's just
Yeah.
so weird.
Yeah, he's very well, you can tell right away there's something wrong with him. Just the
Yeah.
way he talks and his mannerisms. Yeah.
Well, no one will buy the picture, so he puts it in foil and lights it on fire right in the middle of the van. And then he takes his knife and he cuts Franklin's arm. And they're screaming, and the van screeches to a stop, and he half jumps out, they half push him out, and he smears his blood on the black back of the van, and he's on his way. And
Yeah, and it
it's
kind
like,
of
what?
he yeah, well, he leaves a symbol like on the back of the van. It's almost like he's marking the van for down the road, right? So like they know.
Yeah, and an interesting, the next scene they roll up to a gas station slash barbecue joint, and there's no gas. The old man is strange, tells him not to go to the old property they're looking for. Well, one glitch I did find with the movie, and I said the movie's perfect, and I stand by that. But he's asking for the old, where the old Franklin house is? So does that mean you know, the guy in the wheelchair's name is Franklin and his family name is Franklin?
Yeah.
But, it must be on his mother's side.
Oh yeah, yeah. I didn't even catch that.
I'm like, yeah, if your mother wasn't married, your name would be Franklin Franklin, which is weird.
That's true.
But there's a weird guy cleaning the window of their van the whole time they're there, and he actually seems to me makes the window dirtier than when he started. But nobody touches the blood on the
And
side of the van.
yeah,
Like they
yeah,
ignore it.
well, it's because I think it's because it's marked. Like they see that marking, like okay, we're gonna get these people, right? Like I think they have a system set up.
Yeah, so they
That's
get
that's
some.
just a theory, right?
Oh no, it makes sense. They get some weird looking barbecue, which Franklin's got like this sausage hanging out of his mouth that looks like a finger, and they go to the rundown place they're looking for. And Kirk and Pam go looking for a swimming hole, but it's all dried up. They hear a generator running, so they go to this farmhouse with the intent to borrow some gas. And they go to the front door and they hear the pig squealing inside, and Kirk knocks and the door opens. And he steps in, and it's just beautifully framed shot. It's one of my favorite shots in the movie. He's walking forward and he stumbles and he's looking straight up at Leatherface, who
Yeah.
is huge, menacing, wearing a skin mask, and he just kind of squeals and clubs him in the head with a hammer. And then, as bad as that was, he falls to the ground like he's quivering, and
Yeah.
then he hammers him again.
I always thought the feet like shaking like that was the most disturbing part. Like it
Agree.
wasn't. It's not even bloody. It's not any. There's nothing like grotesque about it. It's just really disturbing when you see his like legs shaking like that.
Yeah,
That
agree.
stuck with me as a child when I saw that. I was like, oh. And then he slams the door shut, like violently shuts the door, and you hear that wall, like you hear that sound effect that they play. And to me, that's one of the most iconic openings to a villain ever. I don't think you can beat it.
The introduction is like, okay, this movie already had you on the edge of your seat. What did I just see? What is this thing? And that you're right, that
Yeah.
heavy metallic door that he slams shut is, I agree. It's like the introduction of Leatherface is pulled off perfectly.
Yeah.
Pam, Kirk doesn't come back out, so she goes in looking for him, and she stumbles into a room that's filled with animal and human bones everywhere, ghastly figures made out of parts. And this is where I started to notice. At the introduction, I made note of it, but there's this undercurrent, like this throbbing. It's not even music. It's like I read that like the movie Irreversible, they play this tone through the whole movie that's meant to disturb people, and it's like this must be where they got the idea because there's just weird sound beneath everything that's happening. And you got this chicken in a
Yeah.
cage squawking. So there's just
Yeah,
every
just big
scene is
fat
chaos,
chicken.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's just terror. Like the whole like every scene just like invokes this like unknown terror. Like even like the audience has no idea what's going on, right? Like you don't know what the symbolism of all of the bones, like is there some kind of devil worship stuff going on here? Are these people just sick and ridiculous? Are they killing other people that come and just leaving their bones there? Like it's crazy.
Yeah, there was definitely a human femur in that pile. So I
Yeah.
think it opens a lot of questions and you with no answers, right?
With no answers. Yeah.
So she hollers, she yells, and is grabbed immediately by Leatherface, who in another iconic scene picks her up and sticks her on a hanging meat hook alive. And another I just want the actors for a low budget movie, the actors in this movie were phenomenal
Yes.
because when she gets stuck on that meat hook, she's screaming, and she's stuck on the meat hook, and her whole tone changes, like the air came out of her, and it's like it's perfect to how you would imagine that kind of trauma on someone's body. It was done
Yeah, the
so
way she
well.
like the way she like winces and like reaches for her back, but she can't. And one thing you love about this angle, like you're looking at the angle of how it was filmed and them trying to get this like not get the radar rating. It's like you can tell how they did it, right? Like it's
Mhm.
like he just picks her up, puts her on a stool, and she just goes, "Ow!" Right? You know what I mean? Like there's no actual like nowadays you'd see like they want to show the hook going in
Yep.
and pierce and do they don't do any of that. They
Yeah.
just like put her in front of it. Obviously she's probably standing on a stool. Like I'm talking about like from a directorial like how they would do this like
Yeah.
cinematography. It's just done so simple, but it's just so effective. There's already blood on the wall behind her, so they don't have to show a blood splurt. They don't show any blood splurting,
Yeah.
nothing like that. She just kind of goes up there and acts as if she was being placed on there, and that's it. And it's
Yeah.
just for as low violence as they tried to portray that, it's extraordinarily disturbing.
Yeah. It is. You're right. It's I mean, the act of putting her on the meat hook is extraordinarily violent and aggressive, but they don't, you see the hook and you see her and you don't see, like you talked about,
You don't
you
see it
don't,
happen.
but the implication is so horrific. It's actually worse than seeing it.
Right, and the acting's perfect. It's like you said, it's spot on.
And then he grabs his chainsaw, fires up his trusty chainsaw, and he goes to work on Kirk's body. And I say goes to work because that is what is implied. But again, you do not see the chainsaw touching anything. And I read they used a live chainsaw with a live blade,
Yeah.
and the actor was scared to death because he was moving the saw within inches of his actual flesh, and didn't get him, fortunately.
Yeah.
But they just show the body and they show him coming around, and again, it
Yeah.
doesn't touch. You don't see it, but the implication is very clear.
And it's funny because I think it's Gunnar Hansen that played the Leatherface. He's got a degree in English and mathematics, and he went on to get a graduate degree in Scandinavian studies, right? And he
Was
writes
that
poetry.
Scandinavian studies or
Yes,
Scandinavian?
Yeah, Scandi. So, but he writes poetry, like that's what he
Yeah,
does. He writes like books. It's like he's probably the nicest guy on the planet. Like he's not some, you know what I mean? Like he's probably like very cultured, and like here he is playing this gruesome role. It's to me that the irony in that to me was always funny.
yeah, yeah. No, totally. That's like it's like Robert Englund was a classically trained actor, and then he became
Right,
Freddy
right,
Krueger. And
yeah,
it's like,
yeah,
okay, forget Shakespeare. I'm doing Craven. So Jerry goes to look for the missing couple. The sun is going down. It's getting late. He finds the farmhouse and he finds their blanket that they took with them on the porch. He goes in, and we know how this plays out. We've just seen two people do it. He hears noises coming from the freezer. He opens the freezer, and Pam kind of, her body flies forward like a jack in the box. And there's just screaming. He's screaming. She's screaming. And then Leatherface just hammers him straight to the ground.
yeah.
Again, they don't actually show much, but
No blood, really.
it's
Yeah.
strong.
Well, what's powerful about that scene, I thought was for the character, for Leatherface characters. After he does that, he panics. Like, what have I done? What have I done? He goes to the window. He's looking out the window, and he sits down. You got to look at his face, and like he's just like this disturbed, like mental patient or something. You know what I mean? Like he
Yeah.
has no, like it's like he didn't mean to do what he did. He just did it on instinct or something. Like he didn't want to do it. It's weird with a character with no lines that actually has he actually has a weird amount of depth.
And it's funny you talk about that. He's wearing a human skin mask. So his only emotion, his only way he can emote anything is his eyes and the grunts he makes because he doesn't speak a line. He makes noises
Yeah.
and his eyes. And you're right, he's disturbed. But now, is he disturbed because he killed too many people at once? He's worried more are going to keep coming. You don't get
Yeah.
the impression
We
he's
don't know.
upset
Yeah.
about killing people in general, but like this is the
Right.
third
He's
person.
just
Like,
panicked.
what can of worms is he opening here?
Right. Right.
So now it's dark. Sally and Franklin are arguing, and then they decide they're going to go together and look for the others. So she's wheeling Franklin. They're going, through the woods, and it's dark. And all of a sudden, they just come down a slight grade, and Franklin is wheeled right into Leatherface's chainsaw, and he chainsaws him right through the gut, but you don't see it. Um,
Yeah. There's no real blood.
it's just the way it's shot and framed. There's no real blood, but Sally screams, she runs, and basically from this point forward in the movie, uh, Sally, played by Marilyn Burns, screams for 45 minutes straight.
Yeah. And when Sally's running and when Franklin gets attacked, when she's running and Leatherface is chasing her, to me is the most realistic chase in any horror movie. I don't think they've done it better since then. Like she genuinely looked horrified.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, the acting, these were not A-listers. These are people coming together to make a low budget movie. And they're genuine, and the creepy people are creepy and the scared people are scared, and everyone fit their role so well.
Yeah.
She runs to the farmhouse and runs upstairs, and she finds two corpse looking things. They look like mummies that have just dried out and are sitting there. And she's
Yeah.
trapped by Leatherface, so she jumps out the window. Uh, she runs again. He's back to chasing her. He's chasing her. He's got the chainsaw. She's running. She's screaming. Um, and it's got her screams. It's got the chainsaw noise, and it's got that undercurrent of that pulsing, disturbing music. Like it's an assault on the senses,
Yeah. That's the perfect way to say it.
and it's unrelenting. It doesn't stop.
For a
Uh,
short movie, yeah, the whole movie's an assault on your senses.
yeah. She makes it back to the gas station where the old man brings her inside, and Leatherface was right behind her, but he opens the door, nobody's there, and he's comforting her. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And then he knocks her out and ties her up. And we realize this is a part of something bigger. He
Yeah.
brings her back to the farmhouse where the crazy hitchhiker and Leatherface await, and they're all part of some family of demented souls.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the most it's the most I think they set the standard for the demented like the crazy demented evil family. Like I think this movie kind of set that standard for it, right? Like they're all just like they're bickering about stupid stuff back and forth. Meanwhile, like there's like they've kidnapped someone, right? They don't even care about that part. Like and they're all just like this like uneducated hillbilly type like
Yeah,
insane murderers, and like they're having dinner together, right? You know what I mean? Like they're sane enough to sit down and have Sunday dinner,
yeah,
right? But like then they're just like completely insane. Yeah.
right. Yeah, they're comfortable in their insanity.
Right. Yeah.
It's routine for them. Yeah, Wes Craven even noted that when he made The Hills Have Eyes, that his be the people in the hills were inspired by this. His whole movie was inspired by this movie, which you can see
Yeah.
the connections all the way through it.
Yeah, they're very yeah.
So the whole time they have her captured, they just keep bringing these disorienting sounds and odd camera angles, and they bring Grandpa to the dinner, and he's one of the corpse-like things that was upstairs, and he looks like he's made out of paper mache. He's old and
Yeah.
dried out, and he looks like a mummy. And they
He's
cut
played by
her-
a 19-year-old.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, a 19-year-old. It was a 19-year-old in the mask.
Wow. They cut her finger and put it in the old man's mouth and let him suck it like a baby. And again, they're not showing blood or anything,
Yeah.
but the concept is
And,
so
and he's going like
disturbing.
this. He's going like this while he's sucking it. He's doing these like baby gestures with his hands. Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
It's insane. Yeah, it's horrifying.
She's screaming at the table, and they're mocking and tormenting her. The most disturbing dinner ever captured on film. And they decide they're going to let Grandpa kill her because he is the best killer that's ever lived. And
Yeah.
they
Apparently he killed like 60 in 5 minutes one time or something, right?
Yeah, they drag her over to this bucket, and they hold her head over it, and they put the hammer in Grandpa's hands, but he's too old and decrepit, and the hammer keeps falling out. They're like, "Oh, he'll get it. He's the best killer ever." And it's she's screaming, and they're holding her down, and it's like, my goodness, how is this thing going to end? It's so crazy. But the old
Yeah,
man
the
can't hold
cook's
the
in the
hammer.
background. He jumping up and down.
Yeah, squealing, making his weird
Yeah.
noises.
Come on, Grandpa.
The old man drops the hammer again, and the hitchhiker lets go of Sally so he can help the man with the hammer. And she runs and just jumps through a glass window. Her second glass window that she's jumped through so far in the movie.
Yeah.
They chase her into the road where the hitchhiker man gets a hold of her, and she kind of spins out of his grasp, and he is run down by a truck. Well, Leatherface is right behind him, and he attacks the truck. He's putting his chainsaw against the truck door, knocking the paint off.
Yeah.
And the truck driver gets out the other side, and he grabs a wrench. So him and Sally are running, and Leatherface is chasing both of them. And the hitchhiker turns around and throws the wrench into Leatherface's head, hits him right in the middle of the forehead. And Leatherface falls, and the chainsaw goes into his own leg. And that is the one and only time in this horrific movie that you actually see a chainsaw touch
That's
flesh, and it's his
Yeah.
own flesh.
It's his own flesh, and it's just one cut. Yeah.
Sally flags down a passing pickup truck and jumps in the bed. And it is just an iconic scene where it's driving away. She's holding up against the front of the truck bed, and she's covered in blood, and her face is just pure terror, and she's screaming. And it drives off with her screaming and bloody. And Leatherface is behind her in the sunrise doing his chainsaw dance.
The chainsaw dance in the sun. Yeah.
And that's the end of the movie, and it's like, holy crap.
Right. Like there's no resolution. Right. There's no happy ending. It's just madness all the way to the end.
She survived, but at what cost? You're thinking this woman is
She's
messed
gonna be
up for
comatose.
life.
Yeah. She's gonna be in therapy for the rest of her life.
Yeah. So that is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I think what I was most impressed by, again, it's been my favorite horror movie. I was a fan going in. What I was most impressed by was some of the camera angles that I hadn't noticed before, and the sound design. The sound design in this movie is just perfect to drive you mad.
Yeah. What did you say? Didn't you say that the that iconic sound that they have, isn't that like a camera flash that slowed down the speed?
Yes. Yeah, it's when they used to have cameras, they have to put a bulb in each time, and the flash popped the bulb. So it made that noise, and that's why it's interlaced with the pictures of the body parts, and then the light fades. That's the bulb actually popping and the light disappearing. So it was just so. I used to have that as my text notification on my
I remember
phone.
that. Yeah.
And
I used to love hearing it.
and I would judge people based on people would say, "What the heck is that?" And I was like, "Yeah, you don't know." And then people would say,
Yeah.
"Oh my God, that's from Texas Chainsaw Massacre," and I'd be like, You're in. I like you.
You're in. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just such a cool noise, and it's cool that Toby Hooper recognized. I don't know when you hear that noise, you're like, it sounds gritty, right?
It does.
Yeah,
And that's the other thing we've talked about in the past. This movie is grungy. It's dirty. I watched it in a beautiful 4K restoration. It was for being 50 years old. It was fantastic. But there's a griminess to the movie that's hard to duplicate,
yeah.
particularly with
I don't
modern.
think it'll ever.
Yeah, modern movies are so glossy and shiny, and this is not.
Yeah, yeah. This was. I think it was filmed on 16 mil, right? Right. I don't know. I thought it was. But yeah, that grittiness. You'd have to go back and use that technology to film to get to encapsulate that grittiness that the film captures.
The other thing that the film does that's somewhat unique is so much of the horror takes place in the broad daylight. You know, that
Right.
when she falls into the room with all the bones, it's a well lit room. It's the middle of the day. Sun is out. Like
Yeah.
there's no
The middle
creepy
of the
hiding in the shadows. It's just right there in front of you.
Yeah, and they filmed this movie during a heat wave, so everyone was really miserable while they were filming it. And yeah, it just shows like the movie just looks hot and sweaty, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Texas, right? They pulled it off
Hmm.
perfectly. And the framing device of the grave robbery that that doesn't really tie in, but does tie in because you find out later for when the family's arguing that the hitchhiker was responsible for a lot of that.
Yeah,
Um, it just paints this bigger picture than what they actually present. It gives
right.
us
Yeah, they
mythology and background that you don't know.
yeah, that's why I kind of like that essay I was reading about how it's very Lovecraftian. And I after reading that, I kind of look at the movie completely different now, and actually in a more grandiose way, right?
Mm.
Like I think the movie has this more grandiose concept to it that it makes it Lovecraftian. That like you don't there was some cosmic thing going on with this family, with this, like at the scene when they pull up to the gas station, that one guy that's doing the squeegee, like he's kind of staring up at the sky. Like, he's looking up at the stars for some reason. We don't know why. Right.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, and they're in the middle of talking about astrology in the van, and they pull up to the gas station, and there's this like weird looking dude just looking up at the sky for some reason. Like I just think it has all these unknown cosmic elements to it. I thought that's pretty interesting touch.
Yeah. It all is just wild tapestry of terror.
Yeah.
It's it's
Yeah.
it's a great, great, great horror movie among the best ever made.
One of the best. Yeah. One of the most iconic ever.
Okay, our second film for best of the 1970s is Jaws from 1975, directed by Steven Spielberg. And this is a movie I've seen 100 times, seen it since I was a kid. It's the original summer blockbuster. They used to believe that nobody went to the movies in the summer, and this changed all that. It also has one of the most iconic and fantastic opening scene with the woman swimming in the dark and getting attacked, and all highlighted with John Williams' unforgettable and perfect, instantly recognizable score, adding to the dread. It's just a great summer blockbuster and a horrifying movie.
Yeah, it's one of the coolest movie posters of all time too. I love it.
I think it
You
might
know,
be the best. I really do. I
yeah, well
used to have it at my old house in New
in your
York. I had a
man cave
movie room and
probably.
I had it
Yeah.
hanging in the entrance.
Yeah, that and Exorcist and Terminator 2. Those three are my favorite. But yeah, the Jaws. I like I like the symbolism behind it because it's kind of like the thing that gets you is like the unknown thing like that comes up from below, right? And I
Yeah,
think there's a lot of like symbolism to that, right? Like almost like hell, like, right? Like I don't think that any movie has had a bigger impact on an animal or like how the public perceives a certain danger than Jaws did. Because there's only like 10 or 15 deaths per year on sharks, right? They're not exactly like sharks aren't coming into shorelines. Like people go to the beaches every day during the summer, right? Like sharks aren't coming in there and eating them and saying, "Oh, look, free food." You know what I mean? Like
mhm.
like sharks don't actually like eating people. Like there'll be shark attacks and they're like, "Oh, what was that?" And they'll run. Do you know what I mean? We're not in their food supply chain, right? Like we're just two separate species.
Yeah,
So it's not actually a thing that occurs a lot, right? I think people get struck by lightning more often, right? So he took something that doesn't actually really happen a lot and created this massive fear behind it with this one movie. And I think to that credit, and not only that, Jaws is only on scene in the movie. You're only seeing him for 4 minutes. This is a 2 hour movie.
Yeah.
And you only see the shark for 4 minutes.
Yeah, and some of that is it's funny because everyone considers Spielberg a genius at this point, and I'm not disputing that at all. But his intention was to show it more, and they kept having mechanical problems with Bruce, the mechanical shark
Yeah.
that they filmed with. So they had to keep leaving a lot to suggestion. And much like we just talked about with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the suggestion is often stronger than what you see. Now, when you see the shark, it knocks your socks off.
Yeah.
But seeing it less and less kind of builds up to this, almost this mythical beast that when you finally see it, it's like, oh my God, it's incredible.
Yeah. They make it massive. Spielberg said that when they have those yellow buckets, right? Those like bombs and stuff like that. He said it was great for them to have those in the movie because you could show movement of the shark and have like
Yeah.
a terror with it without actually showing the shark.
Yeah.
Because like you said, there was a lot of mechanical issues with it. It was a struggle.
Yeah. When they hook the flotation barrels, you just see the barrels driving around or, moving around in the water.
Yeah,
Like,
and
your mind knows what's attached to it.
well, and then they throw this cool line in, like Quint's like, no shark's ever taken more than 3, and then they show him taking 4, right? So you're like, oh wow, he must be powerful. He's taken 4, and Quint said no shark's ever taken more than 3.
Yeah.
So like they kind of add that in there to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've read essays that where it argues that Jaws is not a horror movie. It's an adventure. But the problem with that theory is this movie's terrifying. This movie
Yeah, I don't
This
know who
movie
wrote
terrified
that, but
thousands of people and made them afraid of the water and afraid of sharks to a level like impacted like no movie before.
yeah, like maybe Pennywise to clowns, right? Like, but I don't think I don't know what movie that person watched when they wrote this essay, but a child gets eaten by a shark in this movie.
Yeah,
What do you mean it's not a horror movie? You know what I mean? Like,
it's not an environmental adventure. It's
right.
terrifying.
This isn't a coming of age for Brody. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. So after the girl's eaten at the opening, and again, I go back to the sound design. You have the iconic. Go to any pool or any beach or any form of water anywhere, and go dun dun. Everyone knows what you're talking about, right? And then
yeah,
mix
I used
that
to
with
do that to my son when I gave him baths when he was 2.
yeah.
Yeah.
He's looking around like, where is it?
Yeah, right.
And then you layer that iconic and menacing sound with the dinging of the buoy, and it's just like
Yeah,
it's perfect. It's just so good.
yeah.
Once they find the girl's remains, the medical examiner determines it was from a shark attack. So Chief Brody closes the beaches, but the mayor argues against hurting the tourist revenue, and you got kind of the trope of the safety of the town versus the financial well-being, and the politician doing what he thinks is best despite the risk it might involve. Pretty common trope
Right,
now.
and right, the common trope of the fat cat politician that just wants to make money, make revenue, right?
Yeah, and I get it, but when there's safety involved, but we see it quickly backfires because the beaches are reopened, and a shark kills a young boy at a crowded beach, and you have the ominous fin out of the water with not much of the shark being shown, which again I think plays to the benefit of the movie because it's just more menacing to not know exactly what you're dealing with.
Yeah, I mean, you could categorize this movie in the less is more, right? Like we said earlier, like the shark is only shown 4 minutes in the 2 hour film, right? So we don't get we get a lot of we don't get a lot of glimpses of the shark itself, just kind of like the idea of the menacing terror that it is.
Yeah. So they have a bounty. The town puts out a bounty on the shark. Amateur fishermen from all over gather to try to win the prize. and
Right.
local fisherman and hard ass Quint offers to catch the fish for him for
Yeah.
$10,000, and they
Yeah.
kind of blow him off as a kind of a quack.
Yeah. As much as I love this film and it's iconic and I've watched it since I was a kid, there's some stuff about this movie that just is silly to me. Like, why get the government involved? Let's just have a bounty. Like small town, you know what I mean? Like some of the stuff was just it's pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Quint plays the role perfectly though.
Perfect. Yeah.
He's that
Yeah.
that salty, that
Is
salty sailor who doesn't get along
yeah.
with anybody. He's
Yeah.
iconic.
I mean, it's this movie is the best reimaginings of Moby Dick ever, right? Like Ahab going for Moby Dick. You know what I mean? Like
See,
he's like, I'm gonna get my revenge on this thing. Like he's like after it, yeah, for no
it's
reason. It's just a shark doing what sharks do, but everyone in the town takes it personal. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like I got a personal vendetta. It's like it's just a shark, dude. Like it didn't. Yeah.
yeah. Well, actually, that's in my notes later of that exact parallel between Captain Ahab and Moby Dick, the
Yeah.
obsessive hunter, and we see that come out and manifest itself much later.
Yeah.
With these local fishermen, these amateurs all over the place, they crowd the whole area, and a group catches a large tiger shark, and the mayor is quick to declare, "This is it. The beaches are safe, and everybody back to normal."
Yeah. And
But
in the movie for filming, they actually had to bring that shark up from Florida, and by the time they brought the shark up, it was like smelly and stinky and decaying, and like everyone on set was like, "This is terrible." They were miserable because like they could smell it, but they all had to like get together and take the picture with it.
take
And
the
like
picture, yeah.
what happened is when it was upside down, all of its organs were decomposing and fell down to the mouth, and everyone could smell all the organs
Nice.
coming out of it, and they had to sit there and yeah, it was just a nightmare for everyone. But they couldn't get a shark that big in the local area. They actually had to bring one up from down south. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, cool. I didn't know that.
Because this movie was filmed in Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah. The marine oceanographer Matt Hooper was called in by Brody, and he examines the remains of the girl and of the tiger shark, and he determines the girl was killed by a very large shark, and that the tiger shark has no human remains in its digestive system. So he's kind of debunking both theories at once, that it wasn't a boating accident, it was a shark attack, and this isn't the shark. Exploring, Hooper finds a sunken boat and he finds a large shark tooth embedded in it. And he pries the tooth out, and he's going to bring this as evidence to prove there's more going on. And in a scene that is kind of an outlier in the movie, he encounters the corpse underwater of the person who was attacked at the boat, and he drops the tooth. But it's a real jump scare with a rotting body floating in the water, and it's an outlier for the type of horror the rest of the movie is. But I
Yeah,
remember as a
yeah.
kid, it scared the crap out of me.
Yeah, because like there's something going on with the eyes or something. It was just really, yeah, it's just really gross.
Yeah, the mayor dismisses their concerns. He doesn't want to hear nothing about it until 4th of July weekend, when the shark reappears in a packed beach and kills again. Almost gets Chief Brody's son.
Yep.
So they finally give in and they hire Quint. They're going to pay him the 10,000 to get the shark. And Quint and Brody and Hooper all go out together. They're going to find him and they're going to kill the shark. And they're out on the boat. This boat looks like the SS Minnow from Gilligan's Island after it crashed. Like the boat barely looks like it's seaworthy, but that's what they're
Yeah,
at.
yeah, it's shanty.
And much like we talked about the great reveal when Leatherface emerges from that doorway and his huge frame fills the doorway and just is
Yes.
crazy and menacing. There's a great reveal in this movie when Brody is throwing chum into the water, and he just looks over his shoulder and it's right there, and it's like
Yeah.
it's huge, and it looks evil, right? We know it's just the thing about this
It's
movie
evil.
is
Yeah.
an actual thing in nature, but
Yeah.
it's so menacing and it's so overwhelmingly powerful that it's scarier than things we can imagine.
Yeah, it's kind of like grizzly bears with their black beady eyes of death, right? Like there's something to be said about like we have whites in our eyes, right? And that kind of like shows the direction of our pupils that they go in. And that's actually important because like socially like chimps and humans like with the whites of our eyes we can see where people's eye movements are going. But there's something like soulless about like an animal that doesn't have whites in their eyes, right?
Yeah.
Just like a black beady shark or grizzly bear, like it just looks like a soulless thing. Like we'll even make demons like that, right? Like when we write,
Yeah.
like when we construct the artistry of like what a demon looks like, it has these like soulless, like black eyes,
Yeah.
right? And like that. So when you look at a shark like that, yeah, it just kind of has that soulless evil to it.
Yeah. Though, so they estimate this evil, soulless, black-eyed creature at 25 foot. And Quint harpoons the shark, attaching a flotation barrel, one of the yellow barrels that are instrumental in the visual story the rest of the way. But the
Yeah.
shark pulls it underwater. It's no match for the shark's power. Then we have a great scene at night, and this is uh, I've actually, people complain that this movie might be a little slow and the action is sparsed out. Uh, this scene to me is this is one of my favorite scenes of the movie. They're sitting around drinking.
Yeah, yeah, it's great. Yeah.
They're talking
This is
about
my
their
fa this is
scars.
actually one of my favorite scenes. Yeah.
Yeah, it gives you insight into all three characters in one scene, and they're showing their scars about all the things they've had wrong to them, and they're all comparing, unbuttoning their shirt and showing knife stabs and
It's
different
the
things.
first time we see like character development from like Quint. Quint actually starts to show his humanity a little bit. He's not as salty. He's like, all right, let me relate to these guys. And then he also has that great story about how he was on the USS in Indianapolis, I believe,
Yep.
about how they brought the bomb to Japan, and like you could just see like the horror that he had in the story. Like he's been through stuff, right?
And they say he filmed most of the movie drunk. But this
Did he really?
this this tale is cutting, and when he says, 1,100 men went into the water, and 283 came out, and the sharks ate the rest. And it's like that gives you that his revenge, that gives you his purpose for the vengeance
Right.
he
Yeah.
wants, his obsessive Captain Ahab mentality that he takes the rest of the way. It kind of gives you a basis for it. He's not just a wacko. He might be a wacko.
It's not just a right, but what's not like you said, it's not just a token character, right? Like there's actually depth to this character, right?
Yeah.
And so now you're kind of empathetic towards his attitude to everyone, right?
Yeah. Gives it some realism and some gravity to the story.
Hmm.
The shark then rams their boat, killing power. Brody attempts to call the Coast Guard, but the obsessed Quint smashes the radio. He wants to catch this shark and he doesn't want anybody else involved, is what it boils down to.
Right. Just when
A-
you started to like him,
yeah,
it's like, dude,
yeah.
that was our only communication device. What are you doing?
He's not a likable character. You understand a little bit more about him, but he's still not a likable character. But he's a great character in the history of cinema.
Great character. Right.
So the shark, they pursue the shark and attach another barrel, and they have it hooked around the cleats. And the shark, it starts dragging the boat backwards, flooding it, flooding the engine, and before the cleat finally breaks off, and now he's gone with two barrels. The boat is taking on water, the engine dies, and they decide they got to approach this in a different way. Like this whole the dynamic, some of the imagery there. I remember, when they attach another barrel, I'm thinking, well, now two barrels is going to be good. It's not good. And then, when he starts
Right.
pulling the boat backwards, I'm thinking, my good, how powerful can this creature be? Because the boat is like a toy.
Right, right. Yeah, he's the Meg, right? Like just this massive megalodon like thing that's kind of how they're trying to like imagine how big it's going to be.
Yeah. So, the boat's taking on water, the engine has died, so they need a new plan. Hooper gets out his shark cage And Quint's kind of making fun of you fancy fancy college boys and your
Yeah,
ideas. But they got strychnine and they got it in an injectable spear and they can't get it through its tough skin. But if he can stab it in the open mouth, the strychnine will kill the shark. So that's their new plan.
right.
They lower Hooper down, and he's there and he's getting ready, and you see it's great underwater cinematography. It's really for
It
1975.
is.
It's
Yeah.
really cutting edge because you see the world that you're immersed in, but you also see all the action.
Yeah. It was interesting when I was researching the movie. One of the reasons they filmed it in Martha's Vineyard was because they could get out to where it was only 30 feet down and still have be out to the point where it looks like they're at deep sea, right? So like it looks like you can't really see any land, but it's also just enough where they had 30 feet where they could film this stuff, but it's also not deep sea. It's just 30 feet.
Yeah,
So there was, yeah, this it kind of adds that they could get a lot of good cinematography with the depth that they had without having to actually expend the money with being out that far.
yeah. Oh, it's perfect.
Yeah.
It's well done.
Hmm.
The shark makes a surprise appearance. It's a little bit of a jump scare, but he turns around and it's right there, and it chomps the cage and it's crushing it, and the metal is just bending and crushing under the power of its jaws, and it's like,
It's one of my
okay,
favorite scenes. It's my favorite scene in the movie. Yeah.
like this thing didn't stand a chance. Uh,
Yeah.
it destroys the
Just
cage,
eating a ship.
yeah, causing Hooper to drop the spear. So the strychnine's now gone, and Hooper swims out the bottom. Uh, the shark then reemerges, and the ship is listing badly from all the water it's taken on. It's kind of sitting askew in the water, and the shark actually swims and gets up on the back of the ship. And as a kid, this was the scene that tore me up.
This is the scene. Yeah.
Yeah, because he's his giant weight of his 25-foot body on the back of this ship, and now the whole thing is tipped. The water's running, and everything starts sliding and falling, including Quint, who slides down. He can't get a grip, and he slides into the beast's mouth, where he is crushed and devoured. And there's another a perfectly executed scene where the shark bites down on Quint's midsection, and blood splatters out of Quint's mouth at the same time. And I remember as a
Yes.
kid,
Yeah.
like wow, he really bit him. He really hit
Yeah,
him
I
in
really bet him. Yeah.
it's just it's one of
It's
the
like it's
pinnacle scenes of the movie.
pinnacle scene. Absolutely. Yeah. And it just goes to show like when someone writes an essay and says this wasn't a horror movie, that's what I'm like, what do you mean? Like this whole movie's horrific.
It's terrifying because it's also, even though this isn't what happens, and you see bites and you see increased shark activity on the coast. I live by a beach and we get reports of
Yeah.
shark activities, and you hear bites here and there, um, but they're not where they're just chomping them into
They're not
food.
eating a boat. Right. Right.
Yeah, so it's excessive, but it's like, well, sharks are real, and sharks
Right.
get really big, and now I'm really terrified. So to me, it's horrific.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brody manages to stick a scuba tank into the beast's mouth, and now the ship is completely going down. But he climbs into the crow's nest, and he's got a rifle, and he's trying to shoot the tank, and the shark is circling, and he's firing and he's missing, and the shark is circling, and he's firing and he's missing, and finally the shark's coming right at him, and he gets the shot, and he hits the tank, and it explodes. And this is another scene as a kid that just blew my mind. The shark explodes, and there is a huge geyser of water, and then the for what seems like 100 yards in every direction, there's these massive splats of flesh slapping the earth or slapping the water with blood pooling everywhere. it's an unbelievable amount of destruction from that
Yeah.
explosion.
From one bullet. Yeah. I mean, it's an awesome scene.
One of the saddest things was on Mythbusters. They unfortunately proved that
They
that
ruin
scuba
everything.
tank would not have blown up, and the whole damn movie was ruined.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even just that shot, like if you've ever shot a rifle, I'm good at like 20 yards, but like hanging on like a boat, like the way it's hanging, and trying to make that shot from like a moving object like that's in water. Like I would have shot 20, I would have unloaded that whole magazine and just not hit.
Yeah, just an amazing scene. The
Yeah.
flesh just in the water and just slapping, and that
Yeah.
one I never actually read how they actually pulled that off, but it's amazing visually.
Yeah, it's one of the best. It's the best. That I think that shot right there, the explosion, and then when Jaws is eating the boat when he eats Quinn, and then also it's nothing to do with violence, but that reverse shot they do, like the reverse zoom they do on Brody when he first sees the attack in the beginning. They call it like what is that? The Jaws shot, like when you see his face like filled with like terror when he's like sees that
Yeah.
the
Oh
child
yeah. No, I know
gets
the shot you're
attacked.
talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, the jaw shot. Yeah, those three
They're
scenes I
pulling
think are the
away, but
best.
he's getting closer somehow.
Yeah, the jaw shot. They study that in classes now. Like it's like a famous shot.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So Hooper reappears. We thought he might have been dead down there because we know the shark destroyed the cage, but he reappears. Him and Brody get together. They hook up a couple barrels and they paddle back to Amity, with the shark finally being eliminated. The movie taps into primal and very base fears of like
Yeah,
I read one time that like we are conditioned from thousands and thousands of years ago. We're supposed to be afraid of snakes. It's like a protective thing where,
yeah.
snakes could kill you, particularly before
They
antivenoms and medicine.
Yeah, they've done studies where they've shown pictures of people. They've shown pictures to people of guns and snakes, and the fear response was higher on the pictures of snakes than guns. Right? Like
Yeah.
they'd hook them up to electrodes and stuff like that, and they would like show them pictures, and they would get like the electro sensitivity like of their response, and it
Yeah.
was always higher with the picture of snakes. Just
I,
showing someone a picture of snake will provoke more fear than a picture of a gun.
it certainly would with me.
Yeah. Well, they're
Absolutely.
weird creatures. Yeah.
So those are real primal and real fears that it taps into,
Hmm.
and certainly it embellishes on what is real, but it's not like vampires and werewolves and like that stuff's
Mythology is real
fantasy.
things. Yeah.
Yeah, a great white shark is a real absolute apex killer.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and not only that, but like the water is unknown, right? So you're in an unknown environment as soon as you're in water, right?
And
Like we're not
helpless.
adept for we're helpless, right? Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it taps into that perfectly. Again, the fake shark Bruce kept breaking down, forcing him to show less, but that actually it greatly increases the impact when it is shown. The Quint munching scene, for example, if you were seeing the shark 50 times before that, it might not have the same impact that it had. But it created the summer blockbuster. It created the killer, insert any animal here genre, and it put Spielberg and John Williams as headliners, actually, top of their field artists. And
And not only that, we don't have a lot of Fourth of July horror movies, but we have Jaws.
we have
It's
Jaws.
a
Yeah,
Fourth of July horror movie.
yeah, it's still impactful today. And again, I go back to the um, when we play in our pool. My granddaughter has a little plastic shark, and she moves it around,
Yeah, yeah.
and she's never seen the movie, but she goes dun dun dun. And I said, "Where did you learn that from?" And she says, "From you."
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's just like a part of the fabric of
It,
our
it,
society now.
of our culture. Yeah, it's embedded into our culture, and I think that's amazing.
Yeah,
It's a testament to how amazing this movie is.
yeah, for sure. All right. Well, that is our show for this week. The best of the decade, the 1970s. So the best of is what this category is, because you're talking about
100%.
two of the greatest movies of all time, two of certainly the greatest
They're on
horror
the
movies.
they're on a Mount Rushmore of horror movies. They have to be.
Yeah, I agree completely. And so this was a lot of fun. I was looking forward to this. I love both these movies, and I do cinematically consider them both to be as damn near perfect as you can be. So that's saying something.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's our show for this week. We appreciate you watching, listening, however you're finding us. We are the Weekly Horoscope. I'm Jerry. That's Matt, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, everyone.
Your weekly horoscope with Jerry and Matt.